What's going on, guys? Josh here from Polymathics, the YouTube channel that helps you become a modern-day Renaissance man. And in this video, I just wanted to share something about powerlifting. As many of you guys who watch the channel already know, I love to powerlift. It's one of my hobbies. It's one of my passions. And please don't get me wrong, I'm not some professional, but I'm also not a beginner either. I would say, you know, here's intermediate. I'm towards the advanced level, but I'm not professional. And I wanted to share with you something that happened in the gym just last week, because the psychology behind what happened, the story, is very interesting, and it definitely applies to the polymathic mindset in several different instances. So let me just get into it. I was in the gym lifting, and I'm sorry, I haven't been uploading a lot of footage of my lifts. I used to do that a lot, like on Facebook and things like that, and I have a few videos here on YouTube, but I just haven't brought my camera, and I'll start doing that for the powerlifting videos. But I was lifting, and I was doing deadlifts, and there were some gentlemen who were next to me who were also doing deadlifts. And I wasn't lifting anything particularly heavy, at least not for me, but you know, after a while they approached me and they said, hey, you know, we see you doing deadlifts over there. We really appreciate your form, and we're wondering if you could take a look at our form and our technique and kind of give us any pointers. The first thing for me personally that because this situation happens quite a bit, is it's very flattering, but at the same time it's a little intimidating, because I don't know these people. I've never met them before. I haven't seen them in the gym before, and I have no idea what their goals are. I have no idea how long they've been lifting. I don't even know if they're trying to power lift, or are they CrossFitters, or are they just weightlifters who are doing deadlifts? I don't know, right? So automatically I'm always a little nervous about giving anybody any kind of major tips if I don't know them. And it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with, like, what if the information I give them isn't appropriate for their situation? But anyways, let's just finish the story. So the guy, he does his lift, right? He's doing sumo, and he does a pretty good lift. And when he's finished, he's like, you know, should my back be straighter or anything like that? And I'm sitting there, I looked at his lift, and I was like, man, he's got really great form. His form's perfectly. There's nothing wrong with it. And so I sat there, and I pretty much told him something very similar. I told him, listen, while I do practice with sumo, I am not normally one that lifts sumo. I normally actually lift conventional. And I also told him that, you know, for everybody, when you start out and you're a beginner, you want to learn the different techniques, and you want to pay attention to the different cues, because they will help you. They'll prevent you from getting injured, and they'll help you create leverages that are the most effective leverages for your body. But there is a downside to technique, and there's a downside to people who are very strict about technique. And that downside is it doesn't take into account people who are of different body types and have different leverages. For example, I am not an average body type. I'm 6'4". I weigh over 300 pounds right now. I mean, that's pretty average for power lifters, but for regular people, which these guys, they weren't that big at all. They were a little bit more normal size. But the point is, what I would do would be different than what they would do, just because two different body types, right? And probably two different goals. And so, you know, my main message to the gentleman was basically like, hey, you know, people try to teach technique, and it gets you only so far. Once you've mastered technique, in the sense like you understand what it is there for, and it protects you, You have to go beyond technique in order to get to the next phase. You have to find out what personally works for you. And that psychology mindset does not just apply to powerlifting, it applies to everything that you do, any type of mastery. There comes a point where, you know, whether it's Mark Bell or Ripito, you know, all of these coaches out there who are really great coaches, people who have helped thousands, way more people than me. They teach techniques and strategies and tactics to do your lifts, but in the end of the day, you're the one doing the lift. You're the one that has to figure out what works for your body. And nobody else is going to know that except for you. And that's essentially what I told the guy. I said, find where you feel the most powerful, and that is the best place to be. Now, again, when I looked at the guy and I watched his form, it looked really good to me. I wouldn't have changed it. Now, he may be wanting to change it, or here's another piece I don't know. I don't know if his lifting partner was trying to tell him that he needed to. Maybe it was a charged question. Maybe he was fishing for me to tell him either yes or no so that he could debate with his friend. That part I don't know. And there are people like that out there that are just like technique Nazis. And not to like throw shade on the CrossFit community, but having been a CrossFitter myself for a time, I do know that they're very strict and they're very form and technique dependent. And that helps a lot of people who are beginning. But at some point, the people just have to do the lift. You can't spend 30 minutes talking about a lift and then only do the lift for 5 minutes and see any real gains. In order to really see the gains, you got to flip that paradigm around. You need to spend maybe 5 minutes a week, or maybe a little bit more than that, maybe more like an hour a week total, exploring technique and cues and forms, and then take that into your program for like hours during the day and the week and the month. That's when you should be trying to apply it and see, does this work for me or doesn't this work for me? There are cues that I used when I started as a beginner that I don't anymore. There are cues that I used before I was a beginner that just felt natural to me that I got rid of and then I brought back later on when I realized, oh wow, there are also advanced cues, like super advanced cues that you would never want to tell a beginner because they might hurt themselves. That later on, once you've mastered a particular piece of the puzzle, then you can add that to your repertoire. And so I hear some of you guys out there in the imaginary YouTube land saying, okay, Josh, that's powerlifting. How does this apply to polymathics, reaching your full potential? What does this have to do for anybody out here who isn't in the gym all the time? Well, the psychology of that mindset is perpetrated throughout the whole universe. In corporate America, in your writing, in your public speaking, there are so many areas that I can look at and I can see there are those same kind of people out there who are form Nazis or technique Nazis, or they're questioning themselves because they read something in a book or they saw something on a video that said you must do this and this is the XYZ way to do it and there is no other way. And quite frankly, that's not true. The way that is the best way is the way that works best for you. And that's the real point in psychology behind this, is you have to get past this idol that you have that there is a specific form or way to do something. You have to get past that in order to reach your mastery. Mastery is always dependent upon oneself. It's always finding not what works for other people, but what works for you. And while I do not consider myself a master compared to the other powerlifters, I have found pieces of mastery in powerlifting and in writing and in public speaking and various other investing, all of those areas, from going beyond the rules, going beyond the technique. And this is where things like, you can break the rules come into effect. If you're a beginner, breaking the rules is a dangerous thing. But once you've been immersed in whatever it is you're doing for a while, it's time to start breaking the rules and finding what works for you. So let me give you another example. In public speaking, I've been a Toastmaster for years. And one of the things they teach you is like, first you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. That's like the main format. Now there's a couple other pieces, like, you have fact number one, or supporting statement number one, number two, number three, all this other stuff. But in essence, there's three parts to that formula. And so many times I see people who are really, these people are speakers who are far further than I am in their journey, and they've given some pretty intense, very well done speeches before, but I see them fall back on that sometimes to their detriment, meaning that they could have provided a better speech had they just done it more natural and what worked for them, rather than trying to adhere to some rule set that they were told when they were young and still beginning. For example, I'm sitting here talking to you right now, sort of on the fly. This is more extemporaneous. I don't have any planned notes or anything. I could have followed that format, but I feel like this is actually much more effective because my mind is going to places where it would naturally go, which I believe is places that your mind would naturally go while you're thinking about these topics. That's not always the way you want to do it. There are some times where you do want it to be a planned speech. But again, it's just showing you, here's another example of how a rule set or a paradigm or a system can get in the way of you actually doing something. And this is something that I learned from probably the most influential mentor that I've ever had, his name is Joseph Campbell. He's passed away. He's a comparative mythologist. Any of you guys who have read, I'm sorry, any of you guys who have seen any of my YouTube series about the Monomyth, you already know this guy. He's like one of my idols, but he had a really great take on this. And he basically said that, as humans, we create systems in order to manage information and technology. But the problem that happens is that sometimes we create these systems, and then instead of the system serving us, humans start serving the system. And we see this all the time in government, whether, with policies and bureaucratic rules where they were made for the general populace, the median, the average person. But it does not take into account people up here or people over here or people on this side or people on that side. It only takes care of this people right here. That was kind of my beef when I was a service member in the military. A lot of the policies that they have are made, they're generalizations made for people who are just average. They're made for average people. They're not made for either exceptional performers or very low performers. And therein lies an issue. But we see this in a very broad spectrum. And the problem that happens is that when a person gets so locked up in that system, they're so neurotic about it that they can't get beyond that system. It prevents them from reaching their full potential. With these guys over here that I was talking about with the deadlifts, that dude psychologically is preventing himself from becoming stronger because he's thinking he has to lift a certain way. His back has to be in a certain like he's so caught up in that, he's just not trying to feel if he's powerful in that position. And the same thing goes with your writing. Again, if I go back to my Monomyth series, I talk about all of these different stages of the Monomyth, and within those stages are steps, and within each of the stages as well, there are archetypes that we see throughout all types of mythology, both classical, historical, and modern mythology. But here's the thing, there is no rule set. And honestly, this is one of those things that I struggle with sometimes. I'll be developing a story or a character, and I'll be like, well, if it's a trickster, then it has to do X, Y, or Z. Or if it's a shadow, it has to be X, Y, or Z. And then I have to kind of like reel myself back in and say, wait a minute. this feels more natural if I write it like this. This feels more right for the character. And 9 times out of 10, when you have that gut feeling, that's the way to do it. And this is the way I like to think about it. A lot of times when I describe the monomyth to people, which is, it's basically it's an approach not only to analyzing stories and narratives, but it's also an approach to writing. I look at it like a map. It's like a map and you're writing, or a GPS, right? You're going a certain direction and you mapped it out. You said, you know what? I'm going to drive across country and these are the roads I'm going to take. Okay, great. You did that on day 1. Well, on day 3, there's this huge accident that's going to cost you like 3 hours of extra driving unless you change your route. Now, people who have this mindset, like I picked this route, this is the route I'm going, they're going to suffer through those 3 extra hours of driving when they could have taken an alternate detour and only had to suffer through, say, 30 minutes of extra driving. And that is the point. The same thing goes with these deadlift guys. You know, he may spend an extra year trying to get to where he wants to be just because he's focused on this thing that's actually not helping him. Same thing goes with you writing. You know, you may be thinking that you have to write a scene a certain way, or you have to develop a character a certain way, when in reality, your gut feeling, the thing that seems at that moment, it seems like the most non-brainer, like it just feels right. There's this gut intuition. 9 times out of 10, that's the way to go. You've got the map there to help direct you where you need to go. But as you're going, the same thing is in business, right? We have the same kind of principles. Okay, you set a strategic plan for the year or something, like these are my goals that I want to reach, these are the things I want to do, these are the deadlines I want to hit. And then no matter what you do, no matter what you're trying to do, whether it's ads or getting new clients or something, there's always going to be some unforeseen problem or something that pops up. And if you're stuck on, like, I have to follow this plan that I made months ago or weeks ago or whatever, then it's going to prevent you from getting there in the quickest way possible or the most effective way possible, simply because you're trying to go through a brick wall when you could just go around it. And so anyways, that was weighing on my mind for a while, and I figured the last few days I've been mulling over it, and I'm like, you know, this really applies to a lot more than just powerlifting. And for all of those of you out there who are trying to reach your full potential, I'm not suggesting you go on powerlift, but health in general and exercise is something that you need to do. So whatever thing you pick, whether it's powerlifting, weightlifting, running, sprinting, sports, right? There's always going to be a rule set or a system involved. And in order for you to reach your full potential in that area, you're going to have to keep this mindset. And as I said before, other parts of your life, your communication, whether it's written or oral, your relationships, you know, whether it's family or friends or colleagues, there's always some system in place that's going to help guide you as a roadmap. Just remember, if you come across bumps in the road, don't try to drive through them, try to drive around them. All right, guys, this has been Josh from Polymathics. If this has been helpful, please give it a like. If you'd like to hear more and you haven't subscribed, go ahead and click the subscribe button. And what that's going to do is it will send you any content that I make. It'll send it to you like as it's made. Not to mention, you're going to have access to all the other videos that I've posted. And one quick shout out that I want to say is, you know, for those of you who may be interested in writing fiction or the hero's journey in particular, you can go ahead and I'll leave a link down below, but I have a book called The Modern Monomyth, and it actually explores classic stages of the monomyth. You can check that out. And I'm also the co-founder of this indie publishing company called Story Ninjas. And we've published multiple fiction books and nonfiction books. And there's all different types, right? We have steampunk, we have fantasy, we have Christian books. It really depends on what thing you like, but I would say go ahead and check us out and see if there's anything there that might entertain you or interest you or help you along your journey. But until next time, you guys